Hey everybody, it's Devin.
And Kate.
Welcome to Med Crimes.
Happy every other Tuesday.
Here we are.
We're literally here.
We are here.
Yep. It's been a good day. Good weekend. We're chilling.
For us, we're going Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
I have been diving into these Tylenol murders and I just keep going back to how wild it must have been at the time and how chaotic everything was.
I can't even wow.
Yeah, wow is
I want to think about when COVID first started.
I know, the
panic set in.
Yes.
Right?
It's very similar.
And so all of a sudden you get a warning of stop taking this drug.
Yeah. A drug that literally every American has in their medicine cabinet.
Because you take it for so many different things.
Yes. Yeah.
Crazy. I can't. This whole time I'm just like, who done it? Who done it?
Yeah.
And why?
That's what everybody wanted to know in this moment. I take Tylenol so frequently, and I've been more aware of it now that I'm like, oh shit, I just took Tylenol.
There was a bottle in my desk the other day, and I realized when I took two, it was such a generic brand from the Dollar General.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember popping them and I'm going, well, I'm going to die. There it goes.
You're not, though.
I think it was the Rexall brand, super generic from a cheap place. But anyway.
Literally just acetaminophen. It's fine.
Thank you, Rexall, for not,
exactly.
coming to my end.
Exactly. But we've got some Patreons because you guys rule.
We love our Patreons.
We literally love you guys.
You guys are making our family grow.
It's
and
a
we
true
are
story.
so thankful.
I
think we're going to have a prize for lucky number 100.
Oh, we definitely should. That'd be fun.
I think Patreon lucky number 100, when it occurs, we're just going to be hey, you. And we're not even going to tell you guys how close we're getting.
No.
We're just going to be you are number 100.
I love that for us.
We love our Patreon.
We adore you guys. So we have Samantha Gutsky.
Welcome, Samantha.
We adore you. You're gorgeous. And we have Bailey Nathan.
Bailey Nathan. Your name is phenomenal.
I love,
That's a two-name.
A two first name.
Yeah.
And I adore those. And also I adore all of you. All of you have wonderful names.
Especially this last one. I have a question for her. She's probably heard it 1,000 times.
Victoria Davis.
Victoria Davis. Is your daughter named Brooke? You've probably heard this 1,000,000 times, and she's rolling her eyes right now.
Devin is obsessed with One Tree Hill. It's a One Tree Hill thing.
I'm not that obsessed. I'm a fan. However,
you're obsessed.
A family of mine did just go down to Wilmington, North Carolina, because she is obsessed.
Yes.
And therefore, it was on my brain.
Yeah.
And we read your name, and I went, why is that so familiar?
It's definitely an obsession. It's borderline. It's very borderline. You're fine.
Welcome to the family.
And you guys, I have determined, are thestrals, which are a critter.
Heck are those?
They are a critter from the Harry Potter verse. They are the fanged, winged horses that are really cool.
Wow.
Yeah, you guys are fierce.
Horses.
Yes, and they're fierce and fiery, and they're they're elusive and rare and very special in that way. That's what you guys are.
Fanged horses.
Yeah, guys.
Welcome to our family.
Ugh, we love
you all. Thank you so much for your support.
We love you.
The growth is just still so surprising for us.
Oh, yeah.
We're getting to the point where when we first started and we said podcasts are a long game, and we were you really have to get a good 3 solid years under your belt.
Yeah.
We're coming to the end of year 2 soon, which is really crazy to think about. Can you
sure are.
It's insane.
It's wild.
2 years goes by fast.
Yes. So we
Here
have
we go.
part 2 of the Tylenol murders.
Acetaminophen murders.
Yes, acetaminophen, if you will. So, just
hang on to your seats, everyone.
Exactly. Where we left off was we're 2 days now after this slew of deaths in the greater Chicago area happen, which are seemingly tied to poisoned bottles of Tylenol, which were purchased from a number of different stores in the area and from bottles of entirely different lots. And the victims who took the tainted capsules were unknowingly ingesting about 6 times the lethal dose of cyanide, which is what was discovered very shortly after. And this had gone up the chain in Johnson & Johnson, whom issued a recall for all extra-strength Tylenol capsules of any lot number, as well as any Tylenol bottles from 3 different lots. And now investigators are tasked with finding out who did this.
Who did what?
How?
Who, what, where, when, why?
And frickin' why? Like, who the hell would do this and why?
Mm-hmm.
So, I want to clarify a few things from the last episode as well.
Okay.
So,
I love clarifications.
Me too. It's very helpful. So, a listener of ours did message me and pointed me towards a podcast called Killer Psyche, which is phenomenal. You should totally listen to it. And they covered this in detail and did an excellent job. Killer Psyche. Go listen to it. And I was able to find corroborating reports that a member of the EMS crew who worked on Mary Kellerman, the first victim, who had inventoried the Tylenol at the scene. We talked about that the paramedics took the Tylenol from her mom. He was buddies with another EMT or paramedic that worked on Adam Janus. And the two talked about the similarities in the case, and the topic of the Tylenol came up in both cases. And they also raised the question of the connection with the Tylenol, which is what prompted them to turn over the bottles of Tylenol to the investigators that were on the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that really, like, that helping with that little detail helps us connect, right? Because we're re-wondering, was it Helen Jensen? How did other hospitals get alerted?
Right.
That other hospitals had patients with these exact same things.
Exactly. And I wanted to give credit where credit is due. So those paramedics or EMTs were also instrumental in finding this out.
Amazing.
And it's incredibly fortunate that they both inventoried those bottles of Tylenol and we were able to get them.
The healthcare field, everybody has such, like, the magnitude of importance for every role.
Oh, yeah.
From time of 911 call to whatever, time of death, time of recovery, whatever it is. Everyone plays such a magnitude of an important role.
That is so true. That is so true. I also wanted to clarify that a listener reached out and said that what I had referred to as the jewel.
That's right. I read that one.
is actually called Jewel or Jules by the locals. And I'm sure some listeners from the Chicago area wanted to hop through the streaming service and into the pod lab and just punch me in the face for just totally butchering that. So I'm sorry.
And there you have it.
You're welcome. Also, Illinois Bell is a phone company, not a convenience store.
Oh.
The more you know.
Love it.
So thank you for clarifying those few things. Much appreciated. Now, we are on day 2 of this
dun, dun, dun.
shenanigans. Chicago's in this panic. The entire country is getting wind of this and is just absolutely tearing through the nation. Everyone is terrified throughout Illinois and the surrounding states and the entire country. Now,
and we had hysteria of them, like, calling poison control and all those things. I just took it. What do I,
And this is completely unprecedented. Nobody knew how to handle this or, what the next steps were.
It's kind of like, again, COVID. I have a sore throat. Oh my God, do I have it?
Yeah. Or is it allergies?
How do we test for it?
We can't. Remember, we couldn't test.
What?
Unless,
Do I have to call public health in my state and tell them I'm a healthcare provider and I have a sore throat?
Now everybody has 38 COVID tests under their bathroom sink
around.
and just lying around. Oh, it's a wild world we live in. So throughout the state of Illinois, a lot of local stores started pulling all of their Tylenol off their shelves. And then police and fire stations started setting up these collection stations for people to bring their bottles of Tylenol from home and, like, to get properly disposed of or to get inventoried. The US FDA even issued a nationwide warning against taking any Tylenol products for the time being. So the FDA is now involved. Don't take Tylenol. Just don't do it. Now, they're looking at contaminated Tylenol bottles from 3 different lots, like we said at the end of the first episode. So there's lot MC2880, 1910MD, and MB2738. Those are our 3 lots that we have thus far. Investigators first started looking at the manufacturing level because, we got to figure out when and how this is happening. So these 3 lots were all manufactured in completely different states. In fact, 2 of them were manufactured in Texas and 1 was manufactured in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's like across the country.
Right.
So this was kind of steering investigators away from the possibility of this being like someone in the manufacturing stage. And because all of the affected Tylenol at this point is being found in the Chicago area, investigators are starting to work on building the theory that someone is taking bottles of Tylenol from the shelves in local stores, tampering with them and swapping them out, and then putting them back on the shelves to get sold, which is like a terrifying thought.
Tampering the pill at all.
Right.
Making it look absolutely impeccable.
Perfect. Now, as this continues to evolve, within a few more days, in an effort to calm public panic around the issue, Johnson & Johnson actually halted manufacturing around Tylenol at all. And they halted distribution, like they stopped the distribution pathways of Tylenol products. And then they pulled all of their advertising for Tylenol products, everything in print, everything on TV, everything was pulled. Now, 2 Kane County Sheriff's deputies, Detectives Joseph Chavez and Alan Swanson, came forward once this news really started to circulate because a bizarre experience they had was now starting to make a little bit more sense.
Oh?
These 2 deputies were on a routine patrol on the early morning hours of September 29th, which is the day in question. They had stopped at a 24-hour Howard Johnson's for some food around...
Hojo's.
We love me some Hojo's. They stopped around 2:30 in the morning. They noticed something weird in the parking lot. There were 2 abandoned boxes just laying there in the parking lot. Nobody else was around. They went to see what was in these boxes and found hundreds of empty capsule casings, just like in boxes. The boxes were labeled extra strength Tylenol.
Okay.
Between the 2 boxes on the ground was a pile of white powder. So...
Presumably now
actual
Tylenol?
Right. We don't know. So
what?
So listen to this. So the 2 are like kind of getting up close and personal. They're thumbing through the capsules. Chavez even touched some of the powder and like trying to figure out what the hell it was.
Probably not recommended. I'm just thinking.
Well, probably not. In hindsight, the best idea.
Good job,
Both
Chavez.
of them at the time like found it very odd, but they were like, it's labeled Tylenol. It's not like it's a controlled substance. The only illegal thing here is like abandoning trash and littering.
Right.
So therefore, it was really no reason for them to like see things, any further. They did not report or document this finding because to them, they didn't think anything of it, really. Several minutes later, Alan Swanson becomes violently ill. Felt dizzy, started vomiting. Moments later, Chavez came down with the exact same symptoms. Dizziness, vomiting, acutely. They're both incredibly ill. They both sought medical attention, and ultimately their symptoms, thankfully, resolved spontaneously. Their blood work didn't show any obvious abnormalities. They knew something was off, but had no idea what happened in the moment. 4 hours after that is when Mary Kellerman took that first capsule of Tylenol.
The 12-year-old.
The 12-year-old. Of course, once news broke about the Tylenol poisonings, they both immediately made the connection and realized that they both likely came in contact with cyanide and
in
either
a smaller dose.
In a smaller dose, maybe inhaled it or absorption through the skin.
Whatever they touched.
They were both so incredibly fortunate to have survived that incident. So, that
especially since we knew it was inside the capsule was how many times stronger than what it would take to kill someone?
Yes.
And wow.
Yes. Yeah. So that incident was alarming. Obviously, they had come across some discarded, aftermath of Tylenol capsule tampering, whatever that was. I mean, obviously it was cyanide because they got so sick. So, of course, the human race as a whole is awful. And as this thing is evolving within
So not
days,
much has changed.
Not much has changed. No, we were awful in the 80s. We're probably worse now. Reports start coming out of copycat events around the country.
No. Oh, no.
So, in a small town in California, for example, somebody became violently ill after taking Tylenol. The Tylenol was found to contain strychnine, which was another potent chemical.
About that before.
We sure have, yes. In response to this, Johnson & Johnson issues a recall on all Tylenol products, not just Tylenol, but like the children's liquid Tylenol.
Well, and at
Tylenol,
first it was
everything.
the Tylenol extra strength.
Yes, and now we've expanded it to everything, and not just Chicago, completely nationwide. And at that time, there were an estimated 31 million bottles of Tylenol capsules and tablets in circulation.
Imagine?
Yeah, 31 million.
Wow.
And that was a retail value of over $100 million, which today equates to about over $300 million in 2023. That's a lot of revenue that the company is losing. The company also offered to exchange any Tylenol capsules with Tylenol tablets free of charge. So they said, if you absolutely must take Tylenol, we have tablets. Get it directly from us. Get the tablets, not the capsules, and we will give it to you.
Wow.
So,
how scary.
Isn't this wild? And it really impacted operations around the country. Like airport security was checking incoming and outgoing bags for Tylenol products. Hospitals and clinic had to alter their practices. It was a huge deal at the time. This impacted, it was a huge tidal wave of impact just on day to day for almost everything. It's wild. So now investigators are tasked with, okay, we need to figure out how much more cyanide is out there and if we need to get it off the shelves and see if we can collect it as evidence and learn more about this. So a bunch of different agencies sort of come forward, including state and local police, the FDA, the FBI. They're all working together, and they start this monumentous task of inventorying pretty much all of the bottles of Tylenol in the greater Chicago area. So the stores that contained...
I hope they got gloves on.
I know. Well, I'm sure
Masks.
they do, especially after that encounter with the two police officers. So the stores that contained the tainted bottles were 2 different Jewel food locations. The Jewel locations were in Arlington Heights and Elk Grove Village, an Osco drugstore in Schaumburg, a Walgreens pharmacy, and a Dominic's. Both of those were in Chicago. And lastly, a Frank's Finer Foods in Winfield. 3 more bottles of Tylenol were eventually recovered that were laced with cyanide that had not yet been purchased. They were located
thank goodness.
Yeah. Again, found to have been from different lots and manufactured in different states, pointing towards someone local tampering with this, having taken it from the store. So it's not at the
manufacturer level.
Right.
At the warehouse.
Right. Now, a woman named Linda Morgan came forward and stating that she had recently purchased a bottle of Tylenol but hadn't used it prior to hearing of the deaths. So she had purchased it a day or so prior to the events, but hadn't used it because she opened it and she smelled something funny.
Nuts.
So thank the Lord she was one of the 50% that could smell cyanide, but she said, this smells funny. I'm not going to take it. So then news broke, and she, of course, turns this bottle over to investigators and says, this smells funny. They screened it. It was laced with cyanide. Man. So that was another bottle.
Just saved her life.
And her family's.
I'm still surprised that only 50% can smell this.
It's like one of those weird, it's the same thing with red dye.
Yeah.
The red dye, only half the population can taste it. I can taste it. I can taste red dye. Can you?
I don't know.
Then you probably can't. Anytime I eat something with a candy that's heavily red dye, you can taste this bitter, weird thing. My sister and I can both taste it.
No.
Okay.
I must not be able to.
And then there's cilantro, right? I just taste cilantro. I love cilantro, but there's a small percentage that taste soap when they eat cilantro. My brother-in-law, he tastes soap when he eats cilantro.
Wow.
Yeah, it's weird. There's like some so
I
weird
don't
little.
eat cilantro.
Okay. Oh, we're going off the rails just a little bit, but I love it though.
New?
A few things about this whole situation were like really puzzling from a logistical standpoint. So
Just a few?
first off,
I
no,
mean-
like a lot.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about them. So first off, again, and I said this at the end of the first episode, but tampering with capsules and putting them back together, making them look perfect is tough.
Yeah.
That is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody had gone through like a considerable effort to do this and do it really well. Second, getting pure potassium cyanide isn't like that straightforward. There are, like places in the area where you could like order some, but it's not like you can't just like walk into a store and get it. I mean, you would have to like really kind of do some research to figure out like how to
Okay.
get, potassium
Obtain it.
cyanide.
Okay.
So that, is another thing. And then speaking of how pure the cyanide was, stuffing the capsules by hand would pose quite a threat to the person doing this,
Yeah.
as we saw with
Yes.
these police officers,
Yes.
like essentially getting poisoned just by briefly touching
Right.
these things. But I mean, by inhaling, by absorbing through the skin, I mean, whomever did this had considerable resources and knowledge about handling cyanide, how much cyanide to put in each capsule, and must have had a system to mass stuff these capsules pretty easily.
Yeah.
So they studied the bottles themselves. Again, the bottles all looked brand new. The capsules were perfectly uniform.
And again, to clarify, this is in the point in time where the seal on bottles
There was
not
no
there.
seal.
There was no seal when
there
you
was
buy bottles.
cotton and a cap. There was
Yes.
no seal on
Right.
bottles prior to this. So on the bottles themselves, there's not fingerprints, there's no hairs, there's no fibers, there's no physical evidence that they could go by at this point. And this being 1982, DNA really wasn't a thing at all.
Right.
So another dead end for investigators. They had absolutely no leads at this point. Halloween season rolls around.
Oh, fuck.
People are still just like in a panic because there's a poisoner on the loose. What if, he decides to throw some cyanide in with the fucking candy corn?
Right,
Now all these
right.
kids are going to be dead.
Yes.
And, people were just like
Hence
thinking
why
the
we
worst.
grew up in the 90s trick-or-treating, let the parents check the candy.
That's exactly
Yes.
everybody.
Yes.
The 90s, parents got to
Yes.
check the candy because
Yes.
people will poison
That
your
was always
candy.
a thing when I was growing up.
Every Halloween, we heard the same goddamn thing, and this is why.
Any of those homemade goodie bags went in the trash.
Yes.
You only took.
Yeah, you only
Yeah.
took stuff that had intact wrapping on it. Anything that didn't have an intact wrapper gets thrown in the trash.
Here's your PSA for upcoming October.
Yes, please be wary of your candy. And they, nobody could trust anybody anymore. And as a result, a lot of people didn't even participate in Halloween.
Aww.
A lot of kids missed out on Halloween that year because parents were terrified across the nation, but a lot of like in Chicago, which is
That's
so
sad.
sad.
Yeah.
Everyone was afraid their little kid was going to get poisoned.
Right,
It's like so sad.
right.
So investigators start wondering if there's a way to like draw this person or people out and to get them to like reveal themselves,
That's intriguing.
because we don't have any leads. Like, what can we
Right.
do to try to bait this person or try to engage them somehow?
I like that.
So the FBI ended up asking the Chicago Tribune columnist Bob Green to publish Mary Kellerman's home address and the location of her gravesite. So this is a bold move. And, for one, they're spreading all of this like sort of semi-private information about this family who had just lost a child out into, and this is a very high profile case.
Right.
So they were ultimately, they're desperate. They want to help do whatever they can to catch this person. So they agreed. They were willing to help in whatever way they could. The hope was that the killer would see this and go to the gravesite or like drive by the house or hang around the house to like sort of
See what their damage did.
see what their damage did and relive it because, these psychopaths,
That's what they do.
They like to do that. So they kept the gravesite and the house under constant surveillance for months and nothing. Not one weird visitor, not one drive-by, nothing. Another dead end.
Damn it.
I know.
That was an intriguing idea.
I know. It was a good idea. It was worth a shot. When you have literally nothing else and the nation is looking at you to solve this and catch this person. So, during the initial investigations, however, something happened that kind of piqued the investigators' interests immediately. Johnson & Johnson received a ransom letter in the mail. The letter read, quote, "Gentlemen, as you can see, it is easy to place cyanide, both potassium and sodium, into capsules sitting on the store shelves. And since the cyanide is inside the gelatin, it is easy to get the buyers to swallow the bitter pill. Another beauty is that cyanide operates quickly and it takes so very little, and there will be no time to take countermeasures. If you don't mind the publicity of these little capsules, then do nothing. So far, I have spent less than $50.
Oh my gosh.
It took me less than 10 minutes per bottle.
What?
If you want to stop the killing, then wire $1 million to bank account number 84-49-597 at Continental Illinois Bank, Chicago, Illinois. Don't attempt to involve the FBI or Chicago authorities with this letter. What? A couple of phone calls by me will undo anything you could possibly do." End quote.
What?
A lot of the language is like, that was vague and an interesting way to put things. But this letter just kind of like blew up the entire investigation because they were like, oh Jesus, this guy's like reaching out directly to Johnson & Johnson.
And again, is it the actual person or a copycat trying to get money?
Exactly. We don't know. So, of course, Johnson & Johnson didn't listen to the person in the letter and immediately turned it over to authorities. And the investigation suddenly had this like other piece of evidence. This letter was handwritten, it was all in caps, and it seemed like whoever sent this, if he actually did poison the Tylenol, was hoping for some attention or wanted to like taunt the authorities or, just like insert himself into the situation.
And
which is ballsy
how much
as
time
hell.
has gone by now?
So this is literally
months.
No.
Because they watched the house for
they
months.
Did. But... And I'm going on like sort of multiple timelines here because so much is happening at once. So this is within days of the deaths.
Oh, this letter.
Johnson & Johnson receives this letter.
Wow.
Maybe a week max. And we'll go back to like the timeline.
Okay. Because
we get more evidence on the exact timeline of when it's written, when it's postmarked, etc. down the line. So stay with me. But it's literally right after these deaths.
All right.
So they ran fingerprints that were found on the letter and got a match to a man named James Lewis. This guy we're going to talk about quite a bit because he is widely regarded as essentially the prime suspect in the Tylenol murders. And he has never been tried or convicted of these murders. So he is innocent until proven guilty. He has not been proven guilty. All of his involvement in this is alleged, except for what he admits to, which again, we will get to. So, they get this match. A nationwide manhunt for this guy ensues, and he was finally tracked down and arrested in New York City in December of 1982. He and his wife were actually there living under an assumed name. Their last name they had changed to Richardson, and they were living at like a low-rate hotel, just like chilling in NYC.
Now, for them to have gotten a match with the fingerprints, he would have had to have a prior record.
He sure did.
To be in the database.
Oh, Devin, this was a troubled man. We will get to it. So, James Lewis, born in Memphis, Tennessee, but grew up in Carl Junction, Missouri, was adopted at a very, very young age by his adoptive parents who were very young. And it was described that they were sort of ill-prepared to be parents at the time.
Okay.
Like financially and emotionally, maybe they didn't like have quite the resources to adopt him. So his parents actually described him as a troubled kid ever since he was really young. He was really troubled. And others who knew him describe that there was a history of violence within his home among his family. So it's possible that he was subjected to abuse. Again, this is like hearsay. I don't know of anything for sure, but this is just some reports of people that knew him and knew the family personally. As a young adult, he spent some time in the Navy. He did struggle with mental illness, and after an episode in which he allegedly attacked his adoptive mother with an axe, he was committed voluntarily to a state mental institution between the years of 1966 and 1968.
Wow.
Spent 2 years there.
Wow.
Now,
Okay.
after leaving the institution, he relocated back to Memphis, and he met and married his wife, Leanne. The two of them had a daughter who unfortunately suffered pretty profound, like, physical and developmental disabilities.
Okay.
And tragically passed away at the age of 5 from complications from her ailments, and we actually get into that a little bit more shortly. The following gets a little graphic, because we're going to describe a crime that he was alleged to have been involved in. In 1978, Lewis was actually a suspect in a grisly murder out of Kansas City, Missouri, in which an older man named Raymond West was found murdered and dismembered, seemingly in connection with a fraud scheme. So Lewis worked for years as a tax accountant, and he prepared taxes for people routinely. And Raymond was a client of his. And I'm not sure of the exact, like, financial transactions or details here, but Raymond was found in the attic of his home, having been dismembered, and was there for a while and was badly decomposed when he was found. The body had apparently been hauled into the attic using a game hoist, which is literally what hunters use to hoist the game that they kill after being, like, field dressed and skinned and whatnot.
Wow.
Now, what investigators found interesting about this was the knots that were used on the cables. They were complex. They were knots that are not commonly used by a layperson. These are military knots, often used especially in the Navy specifically.
Okay.
So not something somebody would randomly tie. This was a very purposefully complex knot. And once Lewis was deemed a suspect, ropes with these exact knots were found in Lewis's trunk.
Well.
So, I mean, they had enough to indict the guy because he was actually indicted on murder charges for this guy. But the charges ended up being dropped due to a very frustrating technicality. The officers who arrested him failed to read him his Miranda rights.
What?
So he was a strong suspect.
Oh, no.
But that got the entire case thrown out.
What?
Isn't that wild?
Really?
Yes. Yeah, you can't fuck up. You can't not do that. That messes everything up. I've heard of that happening. That's a thing.
Wow.
Yes. Note to self.
Don't fuck up the Miranda rights.
Don't fuck up the Miranda rights if you're ever a police officer. Don't forget that shit. Later in his life, he was actually charged with drugging and raping a neighbor of his whom he had an ongoing dispute with. And unfortunately, this also never went to trial as the victim declined to testify in the end.
Jeez.
So, again, all of this is conjecture. None of it is proven. He has not been convicted of any of these violent crimes, just been strongly suspected.
In multiple.
So, I mean,
including this one.
Could demonstrate a bit of a pattern, one might say.
A little bit.
I have an opinion. So, he's arrested, and of course, he's detained because he wrote these letters. He immediately denies having had anything to do with the actual murders, but he admits to writing the letters, freely admits to that. And then there was the issue of the specific language used in the letter. While the letter did insinuate that he prepared cyanide capsules, he did not admit within the letter that he was actually putting them on the shelves and tricking people into taking them. So he made no direct threats.
Uh-huh.
And while he did admit to writing the letter in an attempt to extort $1 million from the company, he said, I didn't murder anybody. I was just I'm an opportunist.
He acting like a copycat.
Exactly. He's like, I'm just an opportunist, and I saw the opportunity. I wanted to extort $1 million, and I didn't actually hurt anybody. In terms of, investigators start really closely looking at this guy. In terms of a motive, a few news outlets were reporting that investigators had a little bit of a theory if he were to have done this. And it had to do with the death of his 5-year-old daughter. Apparently, his daughter's death occurred when some sutures within her heart, which were placed there to repair a defect, had failed or ruptured.
Oh.
And it was expressed to them at some point that the sutures themselves may have been to blame. And the manufacturer of the sutures was
Johnson & Johnson.
Johnson & Johnson, you guessed it. So Lewis maintained consistently that he had absolutely nothing to do with these murders.
I mean, that motive is a little bit of
It's a stretch. It's a stretch.
It's a stretch. Plausible.
Yes. Plausible, but again, a stretch. So he did freely admit to sending the letter, again, denied actually murdering anybody. He also told investigators it took him 3 days to write the letter, which becomes important later on, so hold on to that. Though he had nothing to do with these murders, he was able to describe in detail to investigators exactly how one could easily perform this whole operation. First, you buy a bunch of Tylenol capsules from a bunch of different stores, you open and empty the capsules, and then you take this big pegboard, and then you drill a bunch of holes in it, and then you place a capsule end into each pegboard slot. Then you
So he's telling them how he would have done it.
Literally, quite literally, saying, this is exactly how you do that, and why it takes so little time and so little money. And then you take a bunch of cyanide, you dump it on the board, and you spread it around and smooth it all out. You pop the capsule tops on each one of them, and then you overturn the board, and you got a bunch of capsules full of cyanide.
For less than $50.
For less than $50 and 10 minutes per bottle. And he knew that it's sold in its purest form for between $7 and $11 per pound, and exactly where to get it. He told investigators all this.
What?
He while being interviewed, it was reported that he was smug. He was grinning a lot. He just kind of gave off this stench of, I am the smartest guy in this room.
Well, was it Charles Cullen that said you got nothing on me?
Yeah.
Or
same
that
shit.
whole you can't prove.
Total same attitude, 100% same smugness. It's all alleged, and I'm just saying that's the attitude that he had. So,
James.
Unfortunately, police are having absolutely no luck placing him physically in Chicago or the surrounding area at the time of the murders, because that would have really helped their case. So, because his timeline, as he described it, is that he was in the Chicago area, but about 4 weeks prior to the murders, he and his wife left for New York, and that was able to be corroborated. They had receipts from the motels they were staying at. They had witnesses that said that
at the time of the murders.
At the time, but they were not able to put him in Chicago around this time. Again, whoever did this would have had to be there at the time to make the switch, plant the laced Tylenol, and there was absolutely no evidence that they could find that he was in the area, unfortunately. Now, they did end up searching his home. Lewis had books about poisonous compounds in his possession. They found fingerprints on several pages in the book, including on the pages detailing cyanide specifically and how much cyanide it would take to kill an average human. They found a bunch of fingerprints on those pages. They never recovered any cyanide, any capsules, or anything like that in his home.
What did they do with that box that had all the capsules that night that they found out?
Oh, I know. I'm imagining that they would have. So I don't know if I couldn't find anything that said that they went back for that or recovered it. I couldn't find anything that said that they did. I know. all investigators have at this point, despite this letter, is circumstantial evidence. So they decided to go ahead and indict him for 1 count of attempted extortion because they knew that would carry a hefty sentence. So at least this would buy them time.
That's what he tried to do and admitted to it.
Exactly. So it does go to trial. And on June 14th of 1984, nearly 2 years after the murders, he's convicted of attempted extortion and sentenced to 10 years in prison. And he made a whole big stink about it, filed a whole shitload of appeals. They never went through. He was a pain in the ass during the entire thing.
Like, damn it, somebody finally got me for something.
Damn it, exactly.
They read me my rights.
Exactly. Ugh. They checked all their little boxes, dotted their T's, crossed their I's. Bullshit.
Someone did their job.
Someone did their job. Now, while all of this is going on and they're preparing to go to trial, many other suspects were also investigated. And another prime suspect was considered, which we'll talk about. His name was Roger Arnold. Now, Roger Arnold was a dock worker at a local Jewel Osco in Melrose Park. He was reported to police by an acquaintance after he was overheard bragging about possessing potassium cyanide. He was also talking about, quote, killing people with some white powder, end quote. Additionally, this person was a little concerned about his like increasingly erratic behavior, which people surmised to have been related to his recent divorce. They thought he was going a little bit crazy. He was heavily investigated and was questioned several times by police, and he was even detained a few times. He always denied any involvement, and there was no actual proof. Now, being questioned by police about something this high profile really impacted his personal life, as you can imagine, because it was no secret that he was a person of interest. And his coworkers start calling him the Tylenol guy. And, it's starting to limit like his relationship status. And so the next part is really upsetting and like very sad. So the summer of 1983, Arnold is so distraught that he waits outside his local bar that he frequents for the owner of the bar, Marty Sinclair. Now, Marty was the one that had initially contacted police about his suspicions about Arnold. He's the one that overheard the conversations about the white powder and that I have cyanide in my house and things like that. So he's the one that said, hey, you want to look at this guy for the Tylenol murders? And in his mind, this guy ruined my life. He's the one that told the cops all this shit about me.
Right.
So he sees the guy come out of the bar. He pulls out a gun and shoots him. Kills him.
Point blank. Done.
Guns him down. Guns him right down. So he soon realizes that the man he gunned down was not, in fact, Marty Sinclair. It was a complete...
Know your target.
It was a complete stranger by the name of John Stanitza, a computer engineer and father of 3.
Oh, no.
Arnold was tried and convicted of the slaying in 1984 and then was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
Bye.
Wow. I mean, this is what a time to be alive.
What a time.
What a freaking time, bro.
What a time.
While Lewis had been charged with a related crime, and then Arnold had been convicted of murdering an innocent man, all because of the allegations against him. This was like as far as we could get with this. And despite this vast investigation from all these different entities, they had very few leads and were completely at a loss with finding who was responsible or getting a conviction on anybody.
Oh my goodness.
So the case essentially goes cold, but never really is completely closed. Like, they open these little task forces over the years and they keep going back to look at it and revisiting things. They get some small leads here and there. Nothing really leads anywhere until after the millennium. Now, in 2007, this is the 25-year anniversary.
Oh boy.
Of the event. And there's new media coverage. There's a little bit of publicity around it. And this new media coverage sort of prompts the state police and the FBI to sort of reopen and form this new task force about trying to figure out what's going on. They're going to re-examine all the evidence. Of course, now we have all this new incredible technology. Right. We have all these other different things we can try that haven't been tried. We have DNA. Who knows? What are we going to find? So investigators are really hoping for some new leads, new discoveries here. One of the first things they noticed during the re-examination of the Lewis letter After using infrared technology, they were able to lift the envelope's postmark from the letter itself. Because the envelope had been lost. It had been tossed and they were not able to recover it. So the date postmarked was October 1st in 1982. This was alarming because, if you recall, he insisted back in 1982 while being investigated that he worked on this letter for 3 days.
Right.
If that's true, he would have been working on this letter before the deaths occurred.
29th, 30th, the 1st. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So he would have been, if he had worked on this letter for 3 days.
Before it was postmarked.
Then he would have been writing this before any publicity about the deaths surfaced.
So, like, even if he, say, started it on the 28th, the day he planted it into the stores.
Then nobody knew about Tylenol deaths on the 28th.
Uh-huh.
Or not even until the 30th.
Right.
The morning of the 30th was when news was breaking.
Right.
Was when the first press conference happened.
Uh-huh.
So if that timeline were accurate,
uh-huh,
and he said that like several times. I worked on it for 3 days. So this prompted another look into Lewis, whom at the time was still very much alive, living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is right outside of Boston.
Yay.
He continued to insist that he had nothing to do with the murders. He was asked specifically about the postmark date, and during an interview was shown a 1982 calendar. And he was asked to count back 3 days from October 1st. Can you do that for me? As soon as he was shown this, he walked back on those claims that it took him 3 days to write the letter.
Right.
He said, it must not have been quite that long then. My memory is like spotty. I'm an old man. Again, not convicted. He is alleged at this point. So, now, through this whole initial investigation for years after, Lewis had always been in touch with investigators and often offered his assistance in the investigation, like all the time.
That's probably just because he wanted to know where it was at.
I think he was fishing for information,
right.
But also he has a little bit of a superiority complex. Apparently he was like a gifted artist and writer. And the FBI still have volumes of diagrams he drew and plans he wrote of how the Tylenol murderers may have done X, Y, and Z, whatever task, getting the Tylenol off the shelves, getting them back in the boxes perfectly. He drew all these diagrams and knew all of these ways that, quote, according to him, any idiot could have done this if they had just done X, Y, Z. Any idiot, not him, though.
Because he's not an idiot.
Again, he was accused but never found guilty of these murders. Now for the DNA. So, DNA, again, not a thing back in 1982, but very much a thing when this new task force was established in 2007. Thankfully, all of these bottles have been well preserved, and we were able to swab them for DNA. Police spent a ton of time obtaining DNA swabs from all of the contaminated bottles, but they also had to go through contact tracing everybody who had potentially come in contact with the bottles in every household they were in and at every level they were at. This meant, for example, Mary Kellerman, all of her family members, the Janices, anybody who was in that house needed to get swabbed. If one household member had passed away, they had to go find their children or siblings and get mitochondrial DNA from swabbing them. I mean, this was a monumentous task.
But then you're also doing the people that distribution, manufacturing.
Thank you. Yes. The paramedics.
Yes.
Dr. Kim.
Yes.
Helen Jensen.
Yep.
Mr. Pichos, the investigator. All of these people had come in contact with the Tylenol bottles. And who the hell knows who else? People at the stores shuffling things around on the shelves. I mean, there are countless others that they were never able to capture, unfortunately. But they did as much as they could. They didn't do this because they were searching for suspects, but what they wanted to do was look for a DNA profile that didn't match anybody that was expected to have been present on the bottle. And they wanted to see if they could find that profile on more than one bottle. So they were in luck. On a few of the bottles, they were able to pull a DNA profile that didn't match anyone who would have come in contact with the Tylenol bottles within the households or anywhere else that they could check for.
That they knew of.
Exactly. And in fact, this person had no familial relation with any of them. In 2010, The body of Roger Arnold, that second suspect, was exhumed because he passed away in 2008. So they actually went and they exhumed his body. His femur was removed for DNA testing. It was not a match for the profile. This does not necessarily exonerate him because, again, this DNA profile that they're focusing on could have been from Joe Schmo who was stocking shelves at whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
okay.
And I read that literally anybody who handled these bottles could have left a DNA profile. Like, you could just touch it, pick it up like that, put it down, and you're leaving skin cells, like however small and degraded it might be. In 2010, DNA was obtained from Lewis. Also not a match. Again,
doesn't exonerate.
How sure are we about this profile? Not very, honestly. Prosecutors did, however, continue to try and build a circumstantial case against Lewis. And in fact, in 2012, the FBI went back and raided his home in Boston in hopes of finding new evidence. And they also raided his Chevy Suburban. They didn't find a whole lot, honestly. At the conclusion of this raid, investigators took their case to the DA in Cook and DuPage counties in Chicago to present the circumstantial evidence against him and see if they wanted to prosecute. Unfortunately, prosecutors didn't think that the investigators had enough to charge him, citing the distinct lack of physical evidence and that the case is purely circumstantial. They're right. Lewis has maintained over the years that this is a, quote, 3-year witch hunt.
30-year witch hunt.
30 years, sorry. 30 years, not 3 years. 30-year witch hunt. And that the real criminals are Johnson & Johnson. He claims that Johnson & Johnson, while conducting their own testing on Tylenol capsules internally, burned thousands of Tylenol capsules and destroyed pertinent evidence. J&J claims that the capsules they destroyed were all accounted for by all the other investigative bodies, like the FBI and Chicago police, and that was the safest way to dispose of the drug remnants that they were going through. So who knows, the ins and outs of that? Maybe there was some dirty work that J&J was doing. I'm not very trusting of Big Pharma, so there was probably some shit that J&J knows that we don't know.
Right.
So
they kind of work in the same way that we've been seeing in cases with the hospital administration.
Exactly.
And disappearing medical records.
Mm-hmm. So who knows, the ins and outs of all of that. So this task force that was developed in 2010, it continues to this day. And to this day, they are trying to pursue this case. Investigators with the Chicago police have told reporters at the Chicago Tribune that they have investigated many different people and have been able to rule out hundreds and hundreds of people. And they go where the evidence takes them. So they're like, this is not a witch hunt. I know we're focusing a lot on Lewis, but we're considering everything here. In mid-2022, it was announced that advanced technology through an independent tech company was able to pull new DNA profiles off of some of the Tylenol bottles, with the help of law enforcement, of course. These samples were pretty degraded, very mixed.
Of course.
But these new profiles that were not identified before are now identified. And now we need to account for these profiles. Who are these? So, again, these were all compared to all of the known DNA profiles that were captured during that 2010 inquiry. And unfortunately, no matches were found. So nothing really came of that new profile.
They keep trying.
They are freaking trying. The latest development comes from just last month, July of 2023.
Well,
James Lewis was found dead at 76 in his Cambridge, Massachusetts home. According to the New York Times, he was found and then pronounced dead after police received a call about an unresponsive person at his residence. And then later, it was determined he died of a pulmonary embolism.
So he only died a month ago.
Literally a month ago.
Wow.
The Tylenol murder case is still open, still active, and we're still seeing periodic updates here and there about these new little findings. So I'm hoping that someday we can get a break in the case or some new connection. Wow. I just hope for these families. The
Janus family losing 3 people.
Not having any clue who did this. Why? Now, this crisis really created a lot of sort of fallout. First of all, we talked a little bit about copycat activity. We talked about that case in California. There were a whole bunch more deaths from that.
Oh no.
Not necessarily from that in particular, but just copycats around the country being inspired by poisoning Tylenol. For example, 23-year-old Diane Estroff died in Yonkers, New York, after ingesting extra-strength Tylenol capsules that were laced with cyanide. And that whole crime was all just an inspiration from the Tylenol murders. And there are countless cases like this. People spiking Tylenol capsules.
Come on.
Which is just so sad. In 1986, a University of Texas student, Kenneth Ferris, was found dead in his apartment after succumbing to a cyanide poisoning. And what they found after they investigated were Anacin tablets, which is an NSAID, I think, similar. It's something that's not really sold as much anymore.
Right.
But Anacin capsules, which were full of cyanide. So again, copycat activity all over the country is part of this fallout. And I feel like there's a lot more technically related deaths from this whole thing. Changes. So this inspired a lot of changes around how we package pharmaceuticals, not just pharmaceuticals, but food and all consumer products, makeup. I mean, everything.
Anything that says if this seal is broken, do not use.
Do not use. So, I mean, before all this happened, you could walk into a grocery store, open up a thing of peanut butter, a jar of peanut butter, and stick your finger in it and take a bite. Or lick it and put the top back on and put it back on the shelf. There were no seals, no tamper evident coverings whatsoever on any products like that. So this,
it's funny when you and I have joked about like Tylenol that we've taken and whatnot, but like there's a medication that I take, and I was at the grocery store, and I think it was last weekend, and it was on the discount in the back, because there were some missing. So like they had discounted the price.
Got it.
And that box that I usually get has like 2 or 3 small bottles. And I'm like, it accounts for obviously maybe 1 bottle missing. But even because the box had been opened, I was like,
you were like, no. So now there's
I don't care if it's, half the price.
There's such like a thing about that now. I think since this happened, it's really inspired us to just be more vigilant.
I once remember, and I couldn't rack my brain, but I once remember with one of my kids, I couldn't remember if on a brand new bottle of formula, because you're so with your kids, you're busy and doing whatever.
Yes.
I couldn't remember on this brand new bottle of formula if I had opened that seal. And I didn't take the chance.
Yeah.
We all know how expensive that shit is, and I'm like,
God.
I can't. That had to go in the trash.
That's heartbreaking, dude.
But you're not going to do that with your newborn if you're like, wait a minute, did I? And that was a couple years ago.
Yes, exactly.
But I was like, did I do that seal?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I know.
Because it was still on, but it was like not pulled off.
But you were like, did I do that?
Right. So it was lifted up but not pulled off. And I'm like, wait a minute.
You can't
I pondered this for a while.
Anyone. You really can't. That's the thing. And so as a result, has prompted not just Johnson & Johnson, but the pharmaceutical industry to start, developing tamper-resistant packaging, which included these induction seals, which were those seals that they put over the bottles. And the food industry started to follow. So anything that they could seal was getting that tamper-evident seal.
Yeah.
And other products, hair care, makeup, anything else that they really could put a seal on that was going to be coming into contact with you or being ingested by you in any way. If they could seal it, it was going to get sealed.
Yeah.
And that has now become that, and also the And then within that year, after 1982, the FDA introduced more stringent regulations on manufacturing to like avoid product tampering. And all of that led to the eventual replacement of the capsule with the solid caplet, which is the tablet that's made in the shape of a capsule, and it's sort of more tamper evident. Like it's very difficult. It'd be very difficult to tamper with that, with Tylenol products specifically.
Okay.
And boys and girls.
And here we are.
She's
checking to make sure that's it.
I'm checking to make sure that's it. Boys and girls, this is the end of the Tylenol murders.
Listen, so I'm thinking as of something you said, could you imagine being in the 80s grocery shopping and be like, damn, I'm hungry. I'm just going to pop that open right now. Give me that peanut butter.
Give
I
me
got
the
a
peanut
spoon.
butter. Give me a wheat thin.
No one's going to know. No one's going to know.
So, I mean...
Thank God we have seals.
Thank God we have seals, bro. We can't fucking trust any of these psychos. Just watch out for you and yours. Be vigilant. Keep your eyeballs open.
PSA for upcoming Halloween.
Yep. Don't eat anything if the wrapper looks a little funk. Just don't put it in your face.
You know what happens after Halloween?
Christmas?
Eating the Santas. Thank you for listening again, everybody. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for being a listener. We appreciate you and value you more than you know.
We are literally obsessed with you guys. We talk about you guys all the time. Everything we do is for you. That's all.
That's it. That's our entire lives. Forget the children. Forget the family. It's you.
It's you.
You. It's you. Hi. You're not the problem. It's you.
Yeah.
Hi. Anyway, if you want to check us out on Instagram, you can follow us at MedCrimes Podcast.
You can tweet at us at MedCrimesPC or X. It's X now.
What?
Twitter's like X now or something.
Missed that.
Yeah.
You can search for us on Facebook by visiting MedCrimes Podcast.
Or if you wish to become a Patreon and join our awesome band of critters, you can join us at www.patreon.com/MedCrimesPodcast. Boom.
You can also send us your crazy stories, any comments, anything that you would love to say to us at medcrimes@gmail.com.
Oh, we love the stories. Please keep them coming. They're wild. You cannot make this shit up. It's like wild. We love it.
Thanks, everyone.
Peace.
Bye.